Hey there, welcome back. I just wanted to take some time today to talk a little bit about emotions. This can be kind of a heavy topic for some people because it's uncomfortable for us to talk about emotions, but I think it's really appropriate considering we're going through a lot of things right now with COVID-19, and there's lots of reasons why we feel we can't really address the emotions that are happening for us. Um, so I know that a lot of people really like the how-tos on how to deal with these different things. The interesting thing about emotions is that we get to the how-to through the why. And when we understand why, then we know how to be more self-aware, and that is where the how comes into place. So stay tuned, and we're going to unpack some of the different primary emotions that maybe we're experiencing right now. Okay, so let's start with talking about what primary emotions we're experiencing right now. So I have this picture right here that shows us 6 different types of primary emotions. What we're going to focus on is actually 3 of these primary emotions. We're going to focus on sad, mad, and scared. And they're 3 that we're actually experiencing the most right now. You can see that there's a lot of different feelings that come from each of the different primary emotions, but sometimes we don't necessarily think of them as being a part of that primary emotion. So if we think about sad, for example, I think one of the major things that's happening is that people are experiencing grief. Our lives were going very, very fast, and all of a sudden they just stopped. We all made a lot of plans around things that we wanted to get done and things we wanted to do, and now all of a sudden it's like we have to let go of all of those things that we planned. That whenever we have to let go of things like that, there's a series of feelings around loss and sadness that are completely normal feelings for all of us to be experiencing. Um, I think that what happens is because we're seeing on the internet that people are dying and that people are very, very ill, we think we're in no place to be upset that this change to our lives is even a relevant thing that we're allowed to be feeling. And I think that, you know, when you're working in like if you're a frontline worker, there's I think a certain amount of envy too, because there are people who get to stay home, and people who are working on the front lines then are maybe a little bit envious that there are people who get to stay home when maybe they don't want to be at work. And vice versa. I think there are people who are home who wish they could work and wish they could be making a paycheck, and they're envious of people who can. So, you know, it's really hard because I think we always want to be walking in someone else's shoes. This idea of like grass is always greener on the other side. And so, you know, whatever you're feeling, you're allowed to feel. And that's really the take home here. I also want to just address the people who are sitting at home who maybe feel lonely because maybe they're not with people that normally help to keep them well, and they're stuck by themselves. So, you know, again, it's a very normal kind of feeling to feel. But I also want to point out that feeling lonely is different than being solitary. There's a connotation associated with loneliness that means that you're somehow lame or that you don't have friends or something like that. And that is the feeling that you get when you don't have people around and you want people around. But there's nothing wrong with actually being alone and being your own company and taking some time and space to think and be solitary. And that is actually really, really positive for our mental health. So there's a bit of a reframe that can happen around that. The last thing is that it's very easy to become kind of depressed when you're lacking a sense of purpose. So when you're not getting up and going to work every day, if you don't have an opportunity to work, that can kind of like hinder our feelings around feeling like we have purpose. And also like when we don't have a good routine and we're not getting up every day, we can kind of get sluggish and lethargic, and then that starts to make us feel more depressed and unmotivated. So getting yourself into a healthy routine is one way that you can start to help that. If you look back at one of my previous posts, I do a thing on how to kind of create routines. That might be a really great place for you to start, just to get some ideas. And what will happen is as you start doing some things, you become more activated, and then you don't feel as lethargic and depressed. So that's one way to kind of look at things. Okay, so if we want to talk about fear or the feeling of being scared, the primary emotion of scared, there's a few things that go into that, obviously. There's terror, there's fear, there's helplessness. And I think that those are things that we're all kind of experiencing right now, especially when all the news around self-isolation first happened and we were realizing how big a deal COVID actually is. And I think that, we saw that when people were pulling toilet paper off the shelves quickly and not being able to get hand sanitizer and all of those things. And, there's a lot of us worrying about if our loved ones are going to be safe, those kinds of things. And I think, too, if you have a loved one that you're worried is going to get sick, there's this feeling of helplessness and we don't know how to help. Or maybe, we know the frontline workers are working really hard, but we can't get them the protective equipment that they need. There's things we want to do to be able to make this whole thing better, but we don't necessarily know what the tools are to do that. And so, when we feel that we've lost control in some sort of way, we tend to feel a certain amount of fear. So again, I'm going back to this idea that when we pay attention to what we can do in our environment, we can do something about that. So staying home is the biggest thing that you can do. Trying to rework this equation on how you do your daily life is something that you can do. But if you're feeling fearful, it's okay that you're feeling fearful. Everybody is feeling fearful. And it's just going to be a process for a little while until we figure out how to carry this new stuff that's happening. The last thing I want to bring up in terms of primary emotions is mad. And so some of the things that you might see around the mad category are frustration, skepticism, being irritated. So frustration is a major one, I think, for lots of different reasons, but one that I can kind of think of off the top of my head is just being frustrated that other people are not socially isolating when you are. It's really frustrating that you know that you're making sacrifices for the greater good, and then you feel that other people aren't doing the same thing. And that's a legitimate feeling to have. And we can't control everything that's happening, but what you can control is what you're doing. So that's really important, that you just keep staying the course in a way that makes you feel good. In terms of skeptical, I would say that we're all kind of skeptical about how this whole thing is going to go, because we don't know. We're hoping and trusting our governments that they're doing the right things. But I think that, what is really positive about it is that we're all, there's a lot of solidarity in what's happening. Communities really come together and people are trying to take care of it together. And although we are all apart in separate houses, we are not alone. And I think that's really the take-home message here. And despite all of that, we can feel irritated. And I would say that, being stuck in a house with a bunch of people can be irritating at times. And seeing the same people all the time and dealing with the same issues sometimes can be irritating. So, try and take your own space when you can, and ask for help if you need help. Talk to people, reach out to people and talk to them about how to solve the problems that you're having difficulty with. Find people to vent to. And if you're really having a hard time, it's time to talk to a therapist maybe and see if you can get somebody to kind of help you navigate some of the hard things that are happening right now. And again, if you're feeling this way, there's no shame around any of this because we're all trying to figure out how to do it. And I don't think there's enough people on the internet saying that you're doing a good job, even when you feel like you're doing the worst job ever. It's a learning process and you got to take it day by day and you got to be kind to yourself. The one take home I really want to mention is just that just because we're seeing things that are happening on the internet that seem really, really horrible and that we know people are sick and people are dying and horrible things are happening, it doesn't mean that the things that you're personally experiencing are not legitimate. Those things, everybody's going to have feelings around this. And I think one of the things we don't really pay attention to so much in our society is that it's okay to feel these emotions. We have this feeling that we want to shut them down and put them somewhere because they're not okay to have. And usually what happens when we do that is we push them down so far that we have what I like to call whack-a-mole theory, which is it pops up somewhere else and it ends up being almost twice as bad in some cases. So, the worst thing is having these types of emotions and trying to ignore them, and then the next thing you know, you're crying at the grocery store while you're trying to pay for your groceries. We don't want these things to happen, but it's okay for you to acknowledge them. And as soon as we acknowledge them, we can move on from them. So, I'm just here to say, don't let anybody tell you that what you're feeling isn't legitimate. And it's important that you recognize that what you're feeling is okay. Anybody who wants to put any comments below, please feel free to do so. You can reach out to me on my website, www.sarahghorsford.com, or you can shoot me an email at video@sarahghorsford.com. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and in the meantime, please stay safe and take care of one another.